The unnatural silence was the first sign. My sick twins were gone, and the only person who could explain was the woman calmly carrying them down my driveway at dawn. The silence was the first thing that woke me. Not a cry, not a cough, just a profound, unnatural stillness that seeped into my bones. For the past 3 weeks, silence had been a luxury my home couldn't afford. My 6-month-old twins, Leo and Luna, had been battling a fever that baffled every doctor we'd seen. It would spike to terrifying heights, leaving their tiny bodies listless and flushed, their cries weak and raspy. Sleep for me was a series of frantic, disjointed naps, punctuated by the shrill alarm of the baby monitor, or the chilling silence that meant I had to check if they were still breathing. My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The monitor on my nightstand was on, but the screen was dark, the sound indicator flat. Dead. The battery must have died. A curse escaped my lips as I scrambled out of bed, my feet fumbling for my slippers on the cold hardwood floor. Every nerve ending screamed that something was wrong. The air in the hallway felt different, colder, emptier. "Leo? Luna?" I whispered, my voice hoarse as I pushed open the door to their nursery. The soft glow of the moonbeam nightlight cast long shadows across the room, and it illuminated 2 perfectly made, perfectly empty cribs. Panic, pure and undiluted, seized me. It was a physical force squeezing the air from my lungs, making my vision tunnel. I patted down the empty bedding, my hands trembling as if they might be hiding under the blankets. It was an irrational, desperate act. My mind raced through impossible scenarios. Did my ex-wife Sarah somehow get in? Did she finally decide she wanted them back after walking out on us 3 months ago? No, she hadn't even called. Then a floorboard creaked downstairs. Adrenaline surged through me, overriding the fear. I bolted from the nursery, taking the stairs 2 at a time, not caring about the noise I was making. The living room was dark, but I saw it immediately, a sliver of blackness against the grey wall. The front door was ajar, letting in a sliver of the icy November air. My world tilted on its axis. This wasn't Sarah. This was something else. Every horror story, every news report I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. I burst through the door and onto the porch, my bare feet stinging on the frozen concrete. The street was deserted, bathed in the sickly orange glow of a single streetlight. And then I saw them. Halfway down my driveway, walking with a calm, unhurried pace towards a dark, idling sedan I'd never seen before, was Ilara, my maid, our live-in nanny, the quiet, efficient woman who had been a godsend for the past 2 months. And in her arms, bundled against the cold, were my children. One tucked securely under each arm, their little heads lolling against her shoulders. A guttural roar tore from my throat, a sound of pure animal rage and terror. "Ilara!" She stopped. She didn't startle, she didn't run. She just stopped, her back still to me. The driver's side door of the sedan opened, but no one got out. The engine just kept humming, a low, predatory growl in the dead of night. "What are you doing?" I screamed, my voice cracking. I started running towards her, my mind a chaotic storm of violence. I was going to tackle her, rip my children from her arms, and I didn't care what happened after that. Put them down. Put my babies down right now. She was just 10 feet away now. I could see the soft pink fabric of Luna's onesie and the blue striped hat on Leo's head. They were so still, so quiet. Were they even breathing? The fear threatened to swallow me whole. As I closed the last few feet, ready to lunge, she finally turned. Her face was illuminated by the porch light, and what I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. There was no fear in her eyes, no guilt, no panic, just a profound, unnerving calm, a deep, sorrowful pity. It was the last expression I ever expected to see on the face of a kidnapper. "Ilara, I swear to God," I choked out, my fists clenched at my sides. She took a slow, deliberate step towards me, tightening her hold on my children. She held my gaze, her dark eyes seeming to look right through me into the very core of my panic. She didn't raise her voice, She didn't try to explain. She simply held out one of the twins, shifting Leo so I could see his face clearly in the dim light. "You need to be quiet, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice as soft and steady as ever. "And you need to look. Really look at your son." "Look at him," I snarled, my voice raw. "What am I supposed to be looking at, Ilara? You've dragged my sick children out into the freezing cold. Give them to me." My hands were balled into fists, every muscle in my body coiled tight, ready to spring. But her unnerving stillness held me in place. That, and the fragile bundle she held out to me. My eyes dropped to my son's face. In the cold, artificial light of the street lamp, his skin was pale, almost translucent. The feverish flush was gone. That was the first odd thing. He should have been red and hot. Instead, he looked cool. Then I saw it. Spidery, faint lines of silver traced across his cheek and forehead, branching out from his hairline. They weren't veins. They looked like frost patterns on a winter window, shimmering with a faint, internal luminescence. I'd never seen them before. In the dim, warm light of the nursery, they would have been invisible. Instinctively, I reached out a trembling finger and touched his cheek. His skin was shockingly cold. Not just cool from the night air, but a deep, penetrating cold, like marble. The silver lines seemed to pulse with a faint light under my touch. I snatched my hand back as if burned. "What is that?" I whispered, the rage draining out of me, replaced by a new creeping dread that was somehow far worse. "It is not a fever, Mr. Henderson," Ilara said, her voice low and urgent. She drew Leo back protectively. "It's a claiming. They are being mocked. The sickness you've been fighting is just a symptom of what is being done to them." The words made no sense. They were the ramblings of a madwoman. "Claiming? Marked by what? You're insane." I lunged for her, for my son, my mind snapping back to the simple reality of the situation. This woman was stealing my children. But before my hands could reach her, a man emerged from the sedan. He wasn't a thug or a heavy. He was an older man, tall and gaunt, with a neatly trimmed silver beard, and wearing a tweed overcoat that looked far too thin for the weather. He moved with a quiet authority, placing himself between me and Ilara. He didn't raise his hands or make a threat. He just looked at me with the same deep, sorrowful pity as Ilara. "Mr. Henderson," the man said, his voice calm and resonant. "My name is Alistair. Please listen. Every moment we waste arguing is a moment they slip further away. Ilara is not their enemy. She is trying to save them." "Save them from what? A made-up fairy tale. A claiming." I spat the word. "You're part of some cult, aren't you? You've been drugging my children, making them sick." "No," Ilara interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. "We were drawn by it. By what's in your house." She gestured with her head back towards the warm, inviting home that had just become a place of menace. "That is the source of their illness. It's not a germ. It's a presence. It has been in their room, night after night, slowly feeding on their warmth, their vitality, replacing it with its own cold essence. The fevers were just their little bodies fighting back." My mind reeled. It was impossible. It was the stuff of nightmares. But then, the pieces started to click into place with terrifying precision. The doctor's confusion. The way the fevers would break and then return for no reason. The bone-deep chill I sometimes felt in the nursery, even when the thermostat was cranked high. The way the twins would sometimes cry in their sleep, a thin, terrified wail that was different from their usual cries of hunger or discomfort. And the cold, silver rash now visible on my son's skin. "What? What is it?" I stammered, looking from the man, Alistair, to Ilara, then back to my silent, ominously still children in her arms. "Something old, something that should have stayed buried," Alistair said gravely. "It latches onto new life, twins especially. It marks them as its own. If the process is completed, they will not be your children anymore. They will be echoes, empty shells." The words hit me like a physical blow. Empty shells. I looked at the dark windows of my home, at the nursery window on the second floor. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb, a nest. We can help them, Alara pleaded softly. We can sever the connection, but we have to go. Now, before it realizes they are gone. My whole world had been turned upside down in the space of 5 minutes. Trust the woman who was abducting my children, or run back into the house that was supposedly killing them. My instinct screamed at me to grab my kids and call the police. My rational mind told me these people were certifiably insane, but as I stood there paralyzed by indecision, a sound drifted out from the open front door. It came from the second floor, from the nursery. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. It was a dry, scraping sound, like claws on wood, followed by a low, guttural chittering. And then a sharp, violent crack echoed through the night, the unmistakable sound of a wooden crib rail snapping in two. A wave of icy air, thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, billowed out of my front door. Alistair didn't even flinch. Ilara just stared at me, her eyes wide with desperate urgency. "It knows," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It knows they're gone. You have to choose, Mr. Henderson. Right now. Us or that." My blood turned to ice. That sound from the nursery wasn't just a noise, it was a violation. It was the sound of something malevolent and physical. In the room I had so carefully designed to be a haven for my children, the rational part of my brain, the part that wanted to dial 911 and scream about kidnappers, was being suffocated by a primal fear I had never known. The choice wasn't between a crazy maid and the police anymore. It was between the chillingly calm people in front of me and the monstrous presence that was now tearing apart my home. "Get in the car," I heard myself say, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. Alistair didn't wait for a second command. He opened the rear door, and Alara slid inside with a grace and speed that seemed impossible while holding 2 infants. She settled them into what looked like pre-installed car seats, strapping them in with practiced efficiency. I stood frozen on the driveway for a second longer, my gaze fixed on the dark maw of my open front door. I could feel it watching me, whatever it was. "Mr. Henderson, now!" Alistair's voice was sharp, cutting through my trance. I scrambled into the passenger seat, not even bothering to close the front door of my house. The car's interior was warm and smelled faintly of old books and something herbal, like chamomile. Alistair got behind the wheel, and the sedan pulled away from the curb with a smooth, silent surge of power. As we turned the corner, I looked back one last time. The light in the nursery window, the soft moonbeam nightlight, flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging the room into absolute darkness. For several minutes, no one spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the soft, even breathing of my children in the back. The impossible calm that had settled over them was more terrifying than their feverish cries had ever been. "Where are we going?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. I looked at Alistair. His face, illuminated by the dashboard lights, was etched with concern, but also a quiet competence that was strangely reassuring. "To a safe place," he replied, his eyes on the road. "A place where its influence cannot reach them. We need to cleanse them of the mark before it becomes permanent." "Cleanse them? How? What do you mean?" The questions tumbled out of me. "And how did you even know about this? About me?" "I am a folklorist, Mr. Henderson, a specialist," he said carefully. "And Alara is a descendant of a very old line. They are sensitive to these things. She felt the presence in your house the first day she started working for you. She came to me a week ago when she saw the first signs on the twins. I turned in my seat to look at Alara. She was watching the twins, her hand resting lightly on Luna's tiny chest. 'The signs?' I asked her. She met my gaze in the rearview mirror. 'The cold spots in the nursery,' she said softly. 'The way they would cry without waking. Then the smell, like old soil and wet stone. And the marks, they started appearing during their fevers, but they were almost invisible, like heat lightning under the skin. Tonight they became solid. I knew we were out of time. It was all too much. A specialist folklorist and a psychic maid. It sounded like the setup for a bad joke, but the memory of that scraping sound from the nursery was still crawling up my spine, and the silver frost-like patterns on my children's skin were undeniable proof that something was horribly wrong. This thing, in my house, I started, trying to wrap my head around it. What is it? Alistair's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Its true name is not something to be spoken aloud. It invites attention. In the old texts, it's called a changeling's cradle, or the winter thief. It's a parasitic entity. It doesn't steal children in the physical sense. It overwrites them. It imprints itself onto their soul, hollowing them out until all that's left is a cold, silent puppet that looks like your child, but is connected irrevocably to the entity itself. My stomach churned. The quietness of Leo and Luna in the back seat suddenly felt sinister. Were they already gone? Were these just shells? Are they still them? I choked out the question, terrified of the answer. For now, Alara answered from the back, her voice firm. They are strong. They fought it. That's what the fevers were. But their strength is fading. You can see it. She gently touched the back of her hand to Luna's forehead. Even from the front seat, I could see the faint, silvery lines now tracing across her skin, a mirror image of her brother's. The cold is spreading. We drove for what felt like an eternity, leaving the manicured lawns of my suburban neighborhood behind for darker, winding country roads. The city lights faded, and soon we were surrounded by the dense blackness of the woods, the headlights cutting a lonely path through the trees. Finally, Alistair turned down a long, unpaved driveway that I would have missed completely. It led to a large, isolated stone house that looked like it had stood for centuries, its windows dark except for a single, warm light glowing on the ground floor. He pulled the car to a stop near the front door. "We are here. We must be quick." Alara was already unbuckling the twins. I got out, my legs unsteady, and moved to help her. As she passed Luna into my arms, the coldness of her small body seeped through my thin pajama shirt, a deep, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced my heart. Her skin felt like stone. Alistair was already at the heavy wooden door, turning a large iron key in the lock. He pushed it open, revealing a hallway lit by a single flickering lantern. "Bring them inside," he commanded, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "Place them on the altar in the main room. The ritual must begin immediately." Altar? Ritual? The words sent a fresh jolt of alarm through me. This was getting stranger and more terrifying by the second. I followed Alara inside, my arms tightening around my daughter. The air in the house was thick with the scent of burning herbs and beeswax. We walked into a vast room, its walls lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. In the center of the room, on a circular stone slab, were intricate carvings and symbols I didn't recognize. This was the altar. Alara laid Leo down gently in the center of the circle, and I placed Luna beside him. They didn't stir. They just lay there, their eyes closed, their chests barely rising and falling. The silvery marks on their skin seemed to glow brighter in the dim, lantern-lit room. "What now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What is this ritual?" Alistair didn't answer. He was busy at a nearby table, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, his movements swift and precise. Alara, however, turned to me, her face pale and grave. "Now," she said, pulling a long, wickedly sharp silver knife from a sheath at her belt. "We need a drop of your blood. From the source. It's the only way to anchor them, to re-establish your claim over theirs." I stared at the knife, then at her face, then at my silent, cold children lying on the stone slab. My mind reeled. They were asking me to believe in ancient evils, psychic maids, and now, blood magic. It was a step too far. This had to be a trick, a delusion. "No," I said, taking a step back. "No, this is insane. There has to be another way. A doctor." Before I could finish, a low moan escaped Luna's lips. Her tiny body convulsed a single, violent shudder. Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't my daughter's warm, brown eyes anymore. They were a solid, shimmering silver, like two polished coins. And they weren't looking at me. They were looking up, past me, at the ceiling, as if seeing something I couldn't. Then, from Leo, an identical moan, and his eyes opened too, glowing with the same terrifying metallic light. The silvery frost on their skin began to pulse, spreading visibly down their necks and onto their hands. "Mr. Henderson, look!" Elara cried out, her voice filled with panic. "The link is re-establishing. It's found them. We are out of time." The sight of my children's eyes, empty, silver, and utterly alien, shattered the last vestiges of my disbelief. This was no medical condition. This was a hostile takeover of their very beings, happening right in front of me. The air in the room grew heavy and cold, the scent of damp earth I'd smelled from my house now clinging to the air around us. The entity wasn't just in my home anymore, it had followed us. "Do it," I choked out, thrusting my hand towards Elara. "Whatever you need to do, just do it now." She didn't hesitate. With a swift, practiced motion, she took my hand and made a small, clean cut across my palm with the tip of the silver knife. It stung, a sharp, clean pain that was a welcome anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. A single, perfect drop of blood welled up from the cut. Alistair was suddenly beside us, holding a small stone bowl filled with a fragrant, oily liquid. Elara let my blood fall into the bowl, and the liquid hissed, a plume of white, aromatic smoke rising from it. "Hold them, both of them. Do not let go, no matter what happens," Alistair instructed, his voice a low, commanding rumble. I knelt on the floor beside the stone slab, gathering my children into my arms. Their bodies were rigid and shockingly cold, their silver eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I pulled them tight against my chest, my own fear a distant hum beneath the desperate need to protect them. Alistair dipped his fingers into the mixture in the bowl and began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, ancient, guttural, and resonant with power. He anointed each of the twins' foreheads with the oily substance, right where the silver markings were thickest. As he did, Elara stood at the edge of the carved circle, holding the silver knife aloft, her own voice joining his in a softer, melodic counter-chant. The moment the oil touched their skin, the room plunged into a profound, bone-jarring cold. A low, furious hiss echoed around us, seeming to come from the very stones of the house. The twins began to struggle in my arms. It wasn't the thrashing of a normal baby. It was a convulsive, unnatural jerking, their tiny limbs moving with a strength that was terrifying. A thin, high-pitched wail escaped their lips, a sound of pure agony that was both their own and something horribly other. "Hold on!" Elara yelled over the rising cacophony. "It's fighting back. Your connection is their only anchor to this world. Don't let it break." I gritted my teeth, my arms aching as I held my writhing children. The silver marks on their skin flared with a brilliant, blinding light, and I could feel the cold intensify, a living presence that was trying to leach the very warmth from my body. The room seemed to darken, the lantern light flickering wildly as if in a gale-force wind. Whispers slithered through the air, coiling around me, promising me peace, promising me silence, if I would just let them go. I saw a flash of my ex-wife, Sarah, smiling at me, telling me to rest. I saw my own bed, warm and inviting. Illusions, tricks to make me loosen my grip. "They are mine," I roared into the oppressive darkness, tears streaming down my face. "You can't have them." I focused on memories. Leo's first laugh, Luna's fingers curling around mine, the weight of them sleeping on my chest. I poured every ounce of love, every ounce of my identity as their father, into my hold. With a final, deafening crescendo of sound, Alistair slammed his palm down onto the center of the stone altar. A wave of force, invisible but powerful, erupted from the circle. The hissing shrieked and then receded, as if a great beast were being dragged back into its lair. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by the natural cool of the stone room. The lantern flames steadied, and in my arms the twins went limp. For a terrifying second there was only silence. I looked down, my heart in my throat. The blinding silver light was gone. The unnatural rigidity had left their limbs. They were just still. Too still. Then Leo let out a weak, sputtering cough, followed by a thin but very human cry. Luna stirred against my chest, her tiny face scrunching up before she joined her brother in a chorus of exhausted, hungry wails. I looked at their faces. The silver marks were gone. Their skin, though pale, was no longer stone cold, and when their eyes fluttered open, they were the warm, familiar brown I knew and loved. They were my children again. Relief so powerful it buckled my knees washed over me. I sank to the floor, cradling them, my own sobs mixing with their cries. Ilara knelt beside me, a look of profound exhaustion and relief on her face. She gently wiped their foreheads with a soft cloth. "It is done," Alistair said, his voice heavy. He looked older than he had just moments before. "The connection is severed. It cannot mark them again." We stayed there for the rest of the night. Ilara helped me feed and change the twins, who were ravenous and fussy, but blessedly, wonderfully normal. Alistair explained that the entity had likely been disturbed from a long slumber when the foundations for my house were dug. It was a creature of place and opportunity, and the twins' new, potent life force had been an irresistible lure. Ilara, he explained, was a watcher, trained from childhood to sense such things and know who to call. As the first grey light of dawn broke, Alistair drove us back. He didn't take us to my house. "It is no longer safe for you," he'd said simply. He took us to a small, clean motel on the other side of town. He handed me a thick envelope of cash. "A new start. Do not go back to the house. Do not retrieve anything. Consider it a tomb. It will be dealt with." I tried to thank him, to offer him payment, but he just shook his head, a small, sad smile on his face. "Seeing them safe is the only payment we require, Mr. Henderson." Ilara gave my hand a squeeze, her eyes shining. "They are beautiful children," she whispered, before getting back in the car. And then they were gone, holding my sleeping children in the anonymous motel room. The events of the night felt like a fever dream. But the small, healing cut on my palm and the healthy, pink flush on my children's cheeks were real. I had no house, no job to go back to, and nothing but the pajamas on my back. But as Leo sighed in his sleep and Luna's tiny hand gripped my finger, I knew I hadn't lost anything. I had saved everything that mattered. The world was wider and stranger and more terrifying than I had ever imagined, but for the first time in weeks, as the sun rose, I felt a profound and overwhelming sense of peace. We were safe. We were together. And we had a new day ahead of us.